want to talk about water trails, what they are, how to use them, and how I think they could be better, or sort of how I think they're missing the mark. And as soon as I get out of here, let's talk about that. Let's go. So I am at the northern tip of Nova Scotia. I forget the name of the town where I am. Dingman? I think it's Dingman. I could be wrong. Water here is gorgeous. Warmish, like I wouldn't say warm, but warmish. And clear, not like Caribbean clear, but beautiful clear. Yeah, super nice paddling up here. If you can find a put in, and we'll get to that. So this is a first. A wave has somehow changed the mode of my bow camera, and it's in playback mode. I can occasionally hear myself. So let's move this entire shoot on land, because there's no way I can get up there to fix it. Okay, so after 2 failed attempts to shoot this video while paddling, let's just have a little conversation here back at our campsite in northern Nova Scotia. And what I was trying to say was a water trail is really just 2 points along a coast, and that coast could be ocean, it could be bays, canals, rivers, lakes, everything. There are thousands of water trails in North America, varying in length from 1.5 miles to 2,000 miles. So there is great variety. I've had opportunity to paddle on 3 different water trails that were all very different in terms of experience and support. So the first water trail I got to paddle was the Hudson River water trail. I was a relatively novice paddler. It was my first multi-day trip. It was my first overnight trip, kayak-based. And I joined the Hudson River Water Trail Association, and in exchange for joining, received a guidebook, which was really like printed in a 3-ring binder. It was actually really well done. Along the river from very far north to Manhattan were campsites where you could take your boat out and camp for free. And they were about a day apart, and it was absolutely wonderful. There were also points of interest. Hey, this is a good place to stop for lunch. It was really excellent. And I don't remember, I want to say that membership was like $60. This was 2000, so a long time ago. But it was a really great thing. There was also a really good map that had the length of the river on 2 sides. So they made it 3 channels for the river on both sides, and then those 6 channels on the printed page were the entire river. So it was great. You only needed 1 sheet and you had the guidebook. It was awesome. It was really sensational. It was a great trip and a great introduction to multi-day and a great introduction to water trails, because it made me think that that's the way all water trails were. My second water trail experience was on what I consider like the granddaddy of water trails, which is, or was, the Inside Passage. I paddled Ketchikan to Skagway, about 350 miles. I had already done the north end of Vancouver Island, Port Hardy to Bella Bella, so about half of the British Columbia section. I have no interest, or had no interest, of doing Seattle to Vancouver Island. Just yeah, not where I want to paddle. I would like to go back and get that missing section of British Columbia. It was gorgeous. The only real guide was, I forget his name, I want to say Robert Miller. His book about paddling the Inside Passage, he paddled it multiple times, had great instructions for paddling it, and it was a very good guide, even though it was like, it's a book. My only complaint with it at the time was that it didn't have like GPS coordinates for the campsites. We did not stay in a single campsite that he had stayed at because we couldn't find them. I made that comment on some forum, and a couple of years later he re-released the book with GPS coordinates for the campsites. Which I am sure was in response to what I said, because it was a very small community of Inside Passage paddlers. I think the year that I did it, about 6 people did it, and 2 of them were me and my friend Sarah. The thing with the Inside Passage is absolutely gorgeous. There was no support. We worked with, there was not like a map. We worked with a combination of charts and topo maps. But there was like nothing in town. There were no designated campsites. There was nothing. You were on your own. Some marinas would let us come in. Some marinas wanted to charge us. It was not, which I don't fault them, but they were charging us like at the boat rate. It was like $45 for us to use the boat ramp in Skagway, which we didn't do. It was a very different experience. At this point, I was a far more experienced paddler. I was a Knowles instructor. I had already paddled Alaska. I had already paddled British Columbia. So it was a very different experience. That brings me to the Main Island Trail. I've now paddled from this trip a bunch of sections of the Main Island Trail. I paddled up here before. I should point out I'm not in Maine right now. I'm in Nova Scotia, but I paddled the coast coming up. I paddled a bunch of times coming up. And the Main Island Trail is oddly supported. And what I mean by that is similar to the Hudson River Water Trail, you join the Main Island Trail Association, and that gets you their guidebook, and it gets you access to their app. The guidebook and the app are both sensational, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The problem with the Main Island Trail is what I really want to do is put in the north and paddle to the south. Do the whole thing in one shot. Okay, so I'm standing at the most northeastern point in the United States. I'm in Lubec, Maine, probably mispronouncing that. And if I were going to paddle the Main Island Trail, this is probably where I would start from. Literally, that's the bridge to Canada, and this is as far up the coast as you can go. So I would paddle that way, make a right, and just continue southwest. The problem is I can't, and there's a big reason why, and it's something as simple as parking. There is no place here for me to park my van and come back to it, and there's no way for me to get back to it, short of taking a train. There's no shuttle service, there's no boat companies that do that sort of thing, at least not that I've found, and that's a real problem. For me, the point of a water trail is to go from point to point. It's not to paddle 5 miles, it's to paddle 500 miles. And the problem is that the logistics, the support is just not set up to do that. And I experienced the same thing on the Inside Passage on the West Coast. So it's not easy to do trips like that. Now, if I were a backpacker, that's relatively easy. If I got on a long trail, there would be places I could park my car for a month. There would be companies that could shuttle me back to my car. And that sort of stuff just doesn't exist in the paddling world. So what's missing from the Main Island Trail in terms of usability, it works great for day paddling, which is how I've been using it. But if you really want to through paddle, you kind of can't do it short of making special arrangements, and it shouldn't be that hard. There are a few places where you can park overnight. I've seen no options for shuttle services. It's just not easy to get from one end to the other without your vehicle, and that is problematic. And that is really the problem with water trails in general. They need better support. So I was talking to a friend who's hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I said to her, hey, when you got off the trail in Katahdin, what'd you do? Her method for getting home was actually a little convoluted. She knew someone who gave her a ride, but she was like, in general, you would get a shuttle, and a shuttle to take you from the trailhead to town, and then from town to a train to get back to one of the airports so you can fly home. And those things are easy to find because there's lots of support. The Appalachian Trail is like the most supported trail in the world. Now, while I wouldn't compare that trail to these water trails I've talked about, there should be similar options, even if they're not quite as good. And so that is upsetting to me that we don't have anything like that. Another thing that surprises me is, like, you would think like the Mississippi River should have an amazing water trail, and I couldn't find sign of one. Okay, I said that I wanted to come back and talk about the Main Island Trail app, which is absolutely amazing. It should be the blueprint for paddling apps. There should be a user-based app for put-ins and takeouts all over the world. Similar to like iOverlander, if you've used that app. But I used the Main Island Trail Association app to find put-ins all up and down the coast, which is what I struggled with the last time I was here. And it's just like, it got me like I was in Freeport, Maine, and it found me a put-in 1.5 miles from where I was. That was perfect. Is Nova Scotia gorgeous or what? I'm just loving it here. My wife said that I could move up here and have a lifetime of paddling, and she was not wrong. And so I think that an app like that should exist. If it does exist and I'm unaware of it, please tell me about it down in the comments. But that should be the way. And if it's user-driven content, it would be constantly updated and reevaluated by the people who are actually using it, which is us. So someone please make that app. So in general, what I'm saying is I want better support for water trails. I would like them to be a little bit more consistent. So like you don't have what happened to me between the Hudson River Water Trail and the Inside Passage, where I was like, I expected all this support. I expected things, and they weren't there. And so I'd like better support. I'd like better understanding. I'd like a little bit more uniform in terms of what we could get. So go paddling, paddle these trails. If you've got a trail you love, let me know. I was amazed to see that like the Great Lakes has thousands of water trails, varying in length and difficulty and exposure and support. But that support needs to be better. It needs to be as easy as going hiking. At the end of the day, that's what I'm saying. Okay, great. Do me a favor. If you enjoyed this, hit like, hit subscribe. You can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. My books are there in electronic form. My gear lists are there. All that stuff is there on Ko-fi. Or you can just buy me a coffee. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the water.